Overcontrol. Overcontrol occurs when otherwise loving parents try to protect their children from making mistakes by having too strict rules and limits. For example, they may keep their children from playing with other kids to protect them from being hurt or learning bad habits. They may be concerned about their children catching a cold that they may make them wear rain boots on cloudy days. The problem with over control is this. While major responsibility of good parents is certainly to control and protect, they must make room for their children to make mistakes. Remember that we learn maturity by constant use. Hebrews 5 verse 14. Over-controlled children are subject to dependency, enmeshment and conflicts, and difficulty setting and keeping firm boundaries. They also have problems taking risks and being creative. Lack of limits. Eileen sighed. Her husband, Bruce, was in his twice-a-week mode of throwing fits whenever she dropped the ball. This time he was yelling about having to reschedule their night out with the Billings. Eileen had forgotten to call a babysitter for the kids until 4 that afternoon. She couldn't understand why Bruce got so wound up over such a little thing. Maybe he just needed some time off. That was it. Eileen brightened up. We need a vacation. She forgot that they'd had one a month ago. Eileen had very loving but very indulgent parents. They couldn't stand to make her do anything or to discipline her with timeouts, consequences or spankings. Her folks thought that lots of love and lots of forgiveness would help her to be the adult she needed to be. So whenever Eileen didn't pick up after herself, her mother would come cover for her. When she wrecked the family car 3 times, her dad got her own car, and when she overdrew her checking account, her parents quietly put more money in it. After all, isn't love patient? Dad reasoned. Eileen's parents' lack of limits on her hurt her character development. Though she was a loving wife, mother, and worker, others were constantly frustrated at her undisciplined, careless way of living. It cost others a lot to be in relationship with her. Yet she was so loving that most of her friends didn't want to hurt her feelings by confronting her. So the problem remained unsolved. Lack of parental boundaries is the opposite of hostility. Again, biblical discipline would have provided the necessary structure to help Eileen develop her character. Sometimes a lack of parental limits coupled with a lack of connection would produce an aggressive, controlled person. We all know the experience of going into a supermarket and observing a 4-year-old in total control of a mother. The mother begs, pleads, and threatens her son to stop having his tantrum. Then at her wit's end, she gives him the candy bar he's been screaming for. But that's the last one, she says, struggling for some control. But by then, control is an illusion. Now imagine that 4-year-old as a 40-year-old man. The scenario has changed, but the script is the same. When he is crossed, or when someone sets a limit with him, the same tantrum erupts. And by then, he's had 36 more years of having the world cater to him. His recovery program will need to be very strong and consistent to help him. Sometimes recovery comes in the form of hospitalization, sometimes in divorce, sometimes in jail, and sometimes in disease. But no one can really escape the disciplines of life. They will always win out. We always reap what we sow, and the later in life it is, the sadder a picture it is. or the stakes are higher. Obviously, we're describing the person who has a difficult time hearing others' boundaries and or needs. These people have been as injured by a lack of boundaries as others have are by too rigid of boundaries. Inconsistent limits. Sometimes, due to their confusion about rearing children or their own injuries, some parents combine strict and lax limits, sending conflicting messages to children. The children don't know what the rules of family and life are. Alcoholic families often exhibit inconsistent limits. A parent may be loving and kind one day, unreasonable harsh the next. This is particularly true because of the behavioral changes brought on by drinking. Alcoholism causes massive boundary confusion in the child. Adult children of alcoholics never feel safe in relationships. They're always waiting for the other person to let them down or attack them unexpectedly. They keep their guard up constantly. Setting limits is traumatic for adult children of alcoholics. Saying no might bring respect or it might bring rage. They feel like the double-minded person described in James 1 verse 6, like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. They are uncertain about what they are and aren't responsible for. Trauma. Up until now, we've dealt with characteristics of family relating, withdrawal, hostility, and setting inappropriate limits are ways parents act towards their children. Over time, these become ingrained in the soul of the child. In addition, specific traumas can injure boundary development. Trauma is an intensely painful emotion experience rather than a character pattern. Emotional, physical, and sexual abuse are traumatic. Accidents and debilitating illnesses are traumatic. Severe losses such as the death of a parent, divorce, or extreme financial hardship are also traumatic. A good way to look at the differences between relating patterns such as withdrawal and hostility and trauma is to look at how a tree in a forest can be hurt. It can be fed inappropriately through bad ingredients in the soil, or it can be given way too much or too little sun or water. That's an illustration of character pattern problems. Trauma is like lightning hitting the tree. The trauma can affect boundary development because it shakes up two necessary foundations to children's growth. The world is reasonably safe. They have control over their lives. Children who undergo trauma feel these foundations shaken up. They become unsure that they are safe and protected in the world, and they become frightened that they have no say-so in any danger that approaches them. Jerry had been physically abused by both his parents for years. He had left home early, joined the Marines, and had several failed relationships and bad marriages. In therapy as an adult in his late 30s, he began realizing why under his tough exterior he always longed for controlling women. He'd fall madly in love with the fact that they could handle him. Then a pattern of compliance to the woman would emerge, with Jerry always on the losing end. One day in a session, Jerry remembered his mother striking him across the face for some small infraction. He vividly recalled his vain attempts to protect himself, pleading, "Please, Mom, I'm sorry. I'll do anything you say, please, Mom." When he promised unquestioning obedience, the hitting would stop. That memory tired in with his lack of power and self-control with his wives and girlfriends, with anger always terrified him, and he would instantly comply. Jerry's boundary development was seriously injured by his mother's abuse. The heart of God seems to beat especially close to the victim of trauma. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, Isaiah 61, verse 1. God desires the wounds of the traumatized to be bound up by loving people. Victims of trauma in the family are almost always recipients of poor or sinful character relation patterns. Withdrawal from our boundaries and hostility towards our boundaries are the ground for which trauma springs. Our own character traits. Have you ever heard someone described as being that way from the womb? Perhaps you were always active and confrontive, always exploring new horizons, or maybe you liked to be quiet and reflective since forever. We contribute to our boundary issues by our own individual characteristic styles. For example, some people with a constant, uh, continually greater amount of aggression deal with boundary problems more confrontationally, and some with less aggression shy away from boundaries. Our own sinfulness. We also contribute to our own boundary development problems by our own depravity. Depravity is what we inherit from Adam and Eve. It is our resistance to being creatures under God, our resistance to humility. It's a refusal to accept our position and a lust for being omnipotent and in charge, not needing anyone and not accountable to anyone. Our depravity enslaves us to the law of sin and death, from which only Christ can save us. Romans 8, verse 2. By now you should be gaining a clearer picture of what goes into boundary problems and boundary development. It's time now to look at what the Bible says about how boundaries should operate in our lives and how they can be developed all through our lives.